From what we gather, President De Silva and Bento were friends. The relationship seemed to strain after Bento fought the sale of their atolls to Chinese buyers.
In fact, when Bento made those protestations last year, it was not as Assistant Vice Minister of Foreign Affairs, but as the Minister of Commerce. Looks like China finally got through to De Silva, who betrayed his friend, demoted him, and quietly sold off the islands to a shadowy buyer.
Like a front for a Chinese state-owned enterprise.
Yes, sir. And I think that Bento was going to blow the whistle to me, and then De Silva got wind of his intentions and had him killed.
I realize that murdering your own diplomats is all the rage these days, but they're not getting away with it on American soil, at the UN General Assembly, no less. If De Silva was involved in this, I'll give him the Noriega treatment.
The FBI is into it, but in the meantime, we need to send a public message to China and to Timor-Leste that we're on to them.
Any ideas?
Tell the press that American authorities suspect Bento was the victim of foul play and are looking into several leads and prospects. Just need your authorization to go public.
You've got it.
Otherwise known as President Dalton.
Yeah.
President, thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me. Good to be here. Thank you.
I want to talk about what's coming up on season 4 of Madam Secretary, but I do have to ask, what is it like to play a president right now?
It's
Being
weird.
part of a show like this.
No, it's weird. It's, you know, after what we've been through in the last year, you know, and what's going on now, we went from being a straight political drama to being an aspirational show.
Yeah.
So, you know, we like to try to present things the way they could be. So it's a great place to work. Teo Leone is the best of the best. Everything about it is wonderful. We get to address, obviously, contemporary, salient, social, geopolitical issues, timely stuff. But also because of the fact that we're a straight-ahead show.
22 episodes a year as
22
well.
episodes a year, and the nature of it is such that, you know, given what they write for me, within that framework, what I'm now trying to do is imbue this character with as much dignity and reason as possible.
Why is that?
Well, it's a fantasy of mine that, you know.
That a president would have those values?
Yeah.
Do you ever walk around while doing the scenes and you're just like, God, I wish it was like this in reality?
Well, no, because then it would be me, and I would never want that job in a million years. So, no.
So you signed on to Madam Secretary as a recurring role in the first season or in the second season?
Season 1.
Star in the first
Season 1, I did the pilot.
You did the pilot.
Mm-hmm.
And what's it like at this point to sort of go into this show 4 seasons in?
You know, it's home. I mean, when you get a job like this, when it works, when it's successful, which this show is, you become a family. And it's just, it's one of the great experiences of my professional life doing this thing, you know. People, you know, they ask you, doesn't it get old and don't you get, you know, no, not at all. And, you know, I feel very, very fortunate to be a part of something like this, you know, especially now. It gives us, you know, we're in a show that gives us a chance to, as I just said, speak to, you know, social issues and I think, you know, every once in a while we have a chance to speak in a way that might actually make people think, and as I say, aspire to something higher, something better, a raising of the consciousness, a way to work towards some kind of a greater good, you know. And I know that sounds like Pollyannish, but you know, I think we need that kind of thing, and I think we have a show in this show that that can speak to that. You know?
Yeah, I can't imagine getting tired of a show like Madam Secretary as an actor, because it's not necessarily like a procedural in the way of like a NCIS or Law and Order or something like that, where, you know, the beats every week are essentially the same.
Yes.
You have long-winded storylines, and your characters are changing and growing over the course of a season.
Very true. And, you know, this writing staff and Barbara Hall, who heads it up and who created the show to begin with, they have an uncanny ability to tap into what's actually happening in the world and in our country. And we've had episodes that we have shot that by the time they air, which is usually 6 to 8 weeks after we've shot the thing, where, you know, we did an episode last season about Greek debt, and it aired this Sunday night. That was the end of a week that was the pinnacle of the Greek debt crisis. It was weird. And, you know, I've asked Barbara, yeah, are you in league with the devil? You know, yeah.
Well, this scene that we just saw had some echoes of sort of Erdogan and Erdogan and his bodyguards sort of beating up protesters and
Echoes
stuff.
of that, yes, absolutely. And as we go into this coming season, we're going to be dealing a little bit more than we have in the past with some domestic stuff, domestic social issues, and Taya's character is going to become more involved with what would ordinarily not be the bailiwick of the Secretary of State, because she's, you know, that position is a diplomat, and it's about foreign issues and international issues. But
are you going to see her role in the administration change or something like that?
Well, I think that we're going to see a certain advancement of the arc of who she is and how she has grown in her role as Secretary of State, and her strength is going to increase, and I think it'll pique people's curiosity, I think, as to where she might go from here.
What I like about Madam Secretary in terms of in the field of sort of political dramas that exist right now is that it's not so much about the games that powerful people play with each other. There's a little bit of that in there.
There's some of that.
There's some of that, but it's not like it's not choked by it like I would say House of Cards is or something like that. It is.
We're not. And I think we're less. I mean, there's so much cynicism now.
Yeah.
About the subject, and I'm proud to be a part of something that isn't cynical. I think that we look at the world of Washington and politics and the idea of national and public service in a way that might speak to the fact that, listen, it's our system. I think it's still the best system on the planet, and we need good people who are willing to participate and dare to be a part of that.
We need to participate to make sure that they participate. We need to work as well. You know?
Absolutely. Yeah.
I think people forget it goes both ways. That, you know, the most thriving democracy is one where the people are well read and hungry to be a part of the process.
Well read. Yes. People need to read more.
And not
watch
headlines
less,
on Facebook.
You know? Yeah.
Books.
Yeah, exactly.
Full articles.
Yeah, exactly.
Keith,
what was the last book you read? I mean, all the way to the end. Yeah.
Wait, what? Hold on. It might have been The Cartel by Don Winslow, which was too long ago.
There you go.
It was too long ago.
I'm about 30 pages from the end of Al Franken's new book, and it's terrific, yeah.
How is it? Is he funny again?
Well, he allows himself to be funny. I mean, and he speaks to that, the fact that he was not allowed to be funny for quite some time. But he has now established himself as a serious senator. And he's doing a great job, and he's a really smart guy, and his heart and his head are in the right place. And it's a fascinating book because he talks a lot about his experience, his growth as a senator, learning how to operate within that system. It's terrific. It's a good read.
I think he'd be a great candidate, personally. I think he presents himself as very no bullshit, you know, and which is exactly what it seems like people really want, even though they bought into all of the bullshit.
And he does actually, you know, he's very careful. And he talks about the mistakes that he's made in terms of transgressing certain lines of decorum, and that how he's had to learn, okay, you can't do that. And he has got very good at that, and he governs himself very well, but he did let himself go when it came to Ted Cruz.
Good.
Yeah, and he does say at one point, he says, ordinarily I'm not going to speak ill of anyone, but I'm going to break my own rule when it comes to Ted, because listen, the fact is that, you know, I like Ted probably more than anybody else in the Senate, and I hate him. So, it's a very fun. He's funny.
One of my favorite moments of this past year with the administration was when Jeff Sessions was testifying. He talked about how scared he got when Franken was yelling at him. Mr. Franken was yelling at me, and I just got confused.
Well, he's a really smart fellow.
Yeah, absolutely.
You know? I wouldn't want to be up against him in a debate.
Oh, no, God, no.
No,
yeah.
No.
You know, I'm so happy that you're here. I'm a huge fan of your work going back to really the beginning. And I only touched on it in the green room with you, but your work with Robert Altman. I mean, Nashville is really maybe my favorite movie of all time. I think it's just an absolutely perfect film, which is somehow, it seems impossible because it's 3 hours long as well. Can you talk about making that movie at all with me? Working with Joan Tewksbury's script, which is just a powerhouse screenplay.
It's an exquisite film. And when we were doing it, we knew we were a part of something good. There was a sense that we all had that we were doing something of value. I knew it was a good movie. And even when it came out, and I was at the premiere here in New York, and it got the attention that it deserved, I knew it was good. I didn't realize until 25 years later, when I went to the 25th anniversary screening at the Academy in Los Angeles, and that room was full of the best of the best. I mean, they had come to celebrate Altman in the 25th. And I sat and watched that movie with that crowd, and I realized it was a masterpiece. It's an extraordinary achievement.
25 years, so that had to be like 2000, right?
So 75, yeah.
Was Altman there at that
Oh, yeah.
time? Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, we were all there. I think we maybe lost one or two people by then. But Bob was certainly there. And then we all went over to his home in Malibu afterwards, a small group of us who were, and it was a great evening. And but it was revelatory to me, and I suddenly realized that I was part of something that was going to stand the test of time.
The last time I watched that movie, I found myself after every scene going, God, what a scene.
Yeah.
Every scene just going, oh my God, like what a wonderful scene.
Let me speak to that. Technically, some of the things that Bob did, I went to the mixing stage one day when he was doing the mix, and they had the score and everything, but the mixing of the sound for a film is so important. And you remember the scene where Ronnie Blakely has had her nervous breakdown, and she's in her hospital room with Alan Garfield, her manager. And he's treating her with a kind of lack of empathy. And Bob said, give me that loop of the wind. Okay, yeah, but lower, lower, lower. What he did was he put this subliminal sound of a wind underneath the entire scene that made the room and the theater feel cold. You don't hear it. You feel it. Right. That kind of understanding of the nature of film and its the connection of the visual and the sound, and he did so much of that. Well,
that's what he was so well known for as well, starting with MASH, sort of the overlaying of all these different audio tracks of people talking in the background and in the foreground, and you see it even in it's beautifully done in the beginning of McCabe and Mrs. Miller, right?
Absolutely.
When we first get into that bar and we're sort of zooming through these several conversations.
It drove Warren Beatty crazy.
That's right. He hated it, right?
He hated it. And it's so interesting because Bob was trying to create something that felt real. And we all know that when we're in conversations, we talk over one another all the time. It's just the nature of how we communicate as human beings. We don't have any trouble understanding one another when we do, And he had a way of putting that, and there was a convention in film, there always has been, you don't overlap. You take your turn. You speak, you stop. The next person speaks, they stop. Overlapping dialogue is considered, outre. You're not supposed to do that because the audience won't be able to hear. They won't be able to.
They can't. Difficult to cut around.
Yes, and it can be difficult to cut around. Bob insisted that everybody feel free to do that and to speak as one would in real life. And then, as a result of having developed that system, he actually created a sound system with which to make that work, called the Lionsgate 8-track sound system. And so the way that worked was he had 8 separate tracks of sound, and each actor had their own radio microphone. And he said, just talk, and talk the way you would. And then in the mix, they can pull you up or lower your dialogue, depending on what he wants to focus on in the scene. But you have that ambiance, that sense of what it really is like when you're in a room full of people and everybody's talking. He was a genius.
Why do you think he cast you as that character in Nashville?
It's interesting.
You thought I was going to go with McCabe.
Yeah, well, I did. But Nashville is actually more interesting because he cast me in the role, which I took on. And at one point, I wasn't comfortable. And I didn't like who I was having to be in that role. I didn't like who I was. I was young, and I had trouble divorcing myself from the role that I was playing. I didn't like him.
He's a bastard.
Yeah, he's a son of a bitch, and I didn't like him, and I didn't like having to be that, and it made me uncomfortable. And at one time, halfway through filming, and I went up to Bob and I said, "Bob, I'm having trouble, man. I don't feel good about what I'm doing." I mean, he wouldn't even talk to me. He said, "You're fine," and he walked away. And he's so smart because what he did was he left me alone. He let me sort of flounder in that state. And what you see in the film in that role, and I wish I could take credit for it, but I'm just not that good. what you see is a guy that doesn't like himself.
Yeah.
It's kind of brilliant.
Right, so that sort of insecurity that you had as an actor in playing this part makes the asshole a little bit more dimensional.
Exactly.
Wow.
Yeah.
So I was looking at your resume, and another director you worked with, and admittedly I have not seen this film of his, but I think it's maybe his last film was Sam Fuller's film that you did.
It might have been second to the last. It was called Street of No Return.
Yeah.
And we shot it in Portugal, and it was all nights.
What was it like? I mean, he had to be pretty old at that point. What was it like working with him?
Amazing.
Yeah.
He ate cigars.
For those that don't know, Samuel Fuller is this classic director from really the 50s and 60s.
He was a classic noir filmmaker.
Yeah, Kiss of Death, right?
Samuel Fuller, Kiss of Death. And my brother Bobby did a film with him and Lee Marvin called The Big Red One. You know?
Right. That's a great movie.
Yeah. And Sam, he was old school, amazing, really fun to work with, and the entire experience was great. There were moments when people had doubts whether or not he actually still knew what he was doing. He did. You know, the film, ultimately, it was what it was. It didn't work particularly well, but I had a great time making it. And, you know.
That's one of those instances where you're like, whether the film works out or not, I hung out with Sam Fuller for
Absolutely.
Like,
and Bobby, you know, he will attest to this, my brother. He ate cigars. He'd start the day with a great big stogie, and he never lit it. And by the end of the day, there was nothing left. There's all kinds of ways to take your nicotine, you know.
And while I was digging around, I didn't realize this because I think I just remember the video for the pink and the dress and her jumping around. But you're in Material Girl, the Madonna video. That's crazy.
I am.
How? I mean, when I discovered that today, which is a weird thing to say I discovered, because I'm sure most people just know that. A lot of people just know that off the top of their head. I was like, what is he doing? How did he get in Material Girl? How did this happen?
I got a call.
Martha Coolidge, or Martha, the director.
Yes, and they, Madonna had asked for me to play that part, and it was, you know, it was an homage to Howard Hughes and that whole. So I said, absolutely, yeah.
What was it like shooting the video with Madonna and everybody?
Kind of surreal, you know. I mean, she's amazing. Yeah. She's a force of nature. She's extraordinary talent and. Artist, and you know, and I think I worked 3 or 4 days. I mean, it was a rock video, you know. Yeah. I do remember when I first met her and I had heard the song, you know, I said, it's so nice to meet you. I'm looking forward to this. Great song. She said, the song's terrible.
Really?
She said that, yeah. Yeah. And I thought, oh, well, I'm an idiot, you know. Yeah.
She was like, the song's terrible, but it's going to sell a lot of records. I just thought it blew me away when I stumbled across that. I was like, because it's a video that I literally only remember for the main image of her, you know, getting carried down the stairs or something like that.
And there was a rumor out there as a result of that she and I had a thing. We never had a thing. I was married. I had kids at the time. I was not true. And she was with Sean Penn, you know. And I wasn't messing with that. So.
I did not know that rumor, nor was I going in that direction.
No. I always feel as though I have to try and, you know, undo that when I get the opportunity. Because there was a moment there where people said, I heard you had a thing with Madonna. No. Did not. Listen, if I had, I'd speak to that, but no.
You'd let the world know.
Yeah, well, wouldn't you?
100%, absolutely. You know, you're still working outside of Madam Secretary. You're still working with really cool directors right now, like David Lowery.
Yes.
And you did, you know, Eighth and Body Saints, and you're in his new film with Robert Redford and Casey Affleck. Did he contact you, or and do you still sort of get a kick out of working with like talented young directors like that are making independent films?
Oh no, he's major. Yeah, he's one of the best directors I've ever worked with. You know, just watch what this guy's going to do for the next 20, 30 years. I mean, he's really, really an extraordinary filmmaker.
What defines him as a great director for you?
I think his ability to capture the human essence in a kind of a visceral way. I thought Ain't Them Bodies Saints was kind of an extraordinary homage to a time and place. I think his ability to capture atmosphere and essence, he's just remarkable. And also, as an actor's director, there are those directors who leave you alone. There are those directors who mess with you and get in your way. And then there are those directors, and they're not as common, who add immeasurably to what you're doing. He's one of those. So I came in, and Casey and I had a huge scene to do. It was my first day's work, and I think we took 2 days to shoot it. It was like 6 or 8 pages long in the film. And I did my first take, and on my side of the shot, and then he came over and he gave me some information, things to think about. It wasn't so much telling one how to do something. It was just, what if you thought about, and it just added layer upon layer upon layer to what I was doing. And as we continued to work, I just kept getting better. And I felt as though by the time I was finished working with him, he had elevated my work beyond anything I could have done on my own.
Sensitive and thoughtful, and
and smart, and understanding how to speak to an actor to reach something that you want to see come out of that person.
Because it's a rarity that directors know how to talk to actors, right?
Well, it can be. I've worked with a number of directors who were terrific in that. Another one was Simon Callow, who's a wonderful actor himself, and I did this, The Ballad of the Sad Cafe with Vanessa Redgrave and Rod Steiger, and Simon directed that. And again, because he's such an extraordinary actor himself, he's also a brilliant writer. I mean, he's written amazing biographies, a definitive biography of Charles Laughton, for example. And when Simon would direct, it was the same thing. I would come in with what I had, and then he would add layers to it. I love directors who make me better,
What about someone like Walter Hill, who's...
Walter.
I love Walter Hill, but he's so bombastic in many ways. I wonder if
he can be, but that's also kind of his. It's a little bit of a private joke, Walter's the best, and he's a guy's guy. So and those are the films that he makes, and so you can look at that and say, well, and be dismissive of that. However,
great director.
He's a great director, and it was Walter who brought me into Deadwood. That's the reason I got to play. Right? Yes, and that's the reason I got to play Hickok in Deadwood was because of Walter.
And that was the second time that you played Wild Bill, right?
No. I only did that once. The first time it was in Jeff Bridges. Did Wild Bill with Walter, and I played Buffalo Bill.
Oh, excuse me. Yeah.
So I played a couple of bills.
You played a few bills. What was it like doing Deadwood? I mean, I think that show is really an undiscovered classic at this moment for people who
truly. Well, it's David Milch, who's a mad genius. What he wrote.
Really a mad genius.
Yes, absolutely. And what he wrote for us. Listen, we actors, we're never going to be any better than what we're given to do by the writer, particularly what we're given to say. And David Milch managed to create a kind of Western genre Shakespearean dialogue. The words that we were all given to speak were so exquisite and so rich. It just is a joy to speak that stuff. Oftentimes we actors are challenged because we're given kind of banal stuff to speak, and then we have to try and find a way to make it sing. This was the opposite. This stuff was so rich that all you had to do was show up, and if paid attention and obviously did your homework, but once you had those words coming out of your mouth, it's like playing with great musicians, I'm a singer, I'm a songwriter, I do that. I'm never happier than when I'm surrounded by great players because, they make me sound good.
You had Robin Weigert doing her role, which she's phenomenal. Yeah. I mean, that's like if
Truly.
You've seen Deadwood, it's an iconic character.
Everybody in that show. I mean,
Let's get some questions from the audience right here.
Hi, thank you for being here.
Thank you.
I really enjoy Madam Secretary. I find it paradoxically really comforting and terrifying. Comforting because I see what's possible when government is working and people really care about helping people. And terrifying because I picture the current administration doing the stuff that's on the show. And I think, oh, we're all going to die. This is terrifying. And I wanted to know, doing the show, how has it changed your view of politics and government? And also, I'm a huge fan of Robert Altman, too. Nashville is one of my top 10 films. Could you talk about how you first got in touch with him and what it was like doing McCabe and Mrs. Miller?
Oh, where do I start? Well, I guess I'll go to McCabe and Mrs. Miller first, since that predates Madam Secretary. I heard about the role. At the time, my brother, David, his manager, Saul Krugman was his name, told me about this movie, said Altman was doing a film. There was a role that I could be right for. I went over to the Lionsgate film offices, this little complex of buildings in Westwood, California, West LA. I went to the office. They said, Bob's upstairs, go across the courtyard, up the steps at the back. And I said, okay, and I walked up the steps. I had hair down to here at the time because I had just come off of doing hair on Broadway for a year, and so I hadn't cut my hair yet. I knocked on the door. He said, come in, and I opened the door, and he was standing in a bathrobe over a bed. It was like an upstairs apartment that he had where he would occasionally spend the night if he didn't feel like going home to Malibu where he lived. And there he was unwrapping a brown-wrapped package with, like, twine. And he said, how are you? Come on in. I just got back from Cartagena, Colombia, and I thought, Cartagena, Colombia, and he's opening a bundle of, what is that, you know? And then, did you bring in a pound of Coke, Bob? What, you know? But it was...
Get this movie started.
It was pre-Columbian art that he had purchased. He had been at the Cartagena Film Festival, and he said, yeah, I just bought that, and there was little statues and stuff. And he looked at me, and he said, so we're going to do this Western. I said, yeah. He said, did you read it? And I said, uh-huh. He said, the role of the cowboy. I said, yeah. And he said, you want to do it? And I said, yeah. He said, okay. That was my audition. Let me just say, I think I'm an okay actor. I've never felt that I was a very good auditioner. I think I'm a better auditioner if I'm auditioning for theater. I don't know why that is, but for some reason I think I don't know. Anyhow, never felt like I was a good auditioner. In fact, for a longest time, I had an almost unblemished record of never getting a role for which I'd auditioned and never having auditioned for any role that I'd got. So, and this was the beginning of kind of that string. But the fact that Bob saw what he saw in me and then chose to hire me to play that role because of the nature of the role in that film, Bob cast essence. And he gave me, it was sort of a bona fide as a result of that. And that was really what established me as a young actor in Hollywood, in the movies. So I've always been beholden to him for that. Madam Secretary, that showed up. They told me about the role. I said I would love to do it. We started filming the show. Obviously, when we began, Hillary Clinton was Secretary of State. Obama was our president. It was a very different world from the one in which we are living now. After that election, when Mr. Trump won, sort of, we all wondered what that was going to mean for what we were doing as a political drama. And what we came to realize was that, okay, we were going to stop being a straight-ahead political drama, which we still are, but in addition, we were going to add the layer of being an aspirational show, of trying to present the concept of public service and of government as something that, when addressed and when approached with the right mindset, is an essential thing and something that can be of great benefit to a society. And I think that that's what we're trying to remind people of now when we do our show.
Absolutely. Next question, right here.
Hi.
Hi.
So I think there's a lot of really interesting and different political dramas on TV right now that have a lot of different portrayals of presidents. So I was wondering, do you talk to any of the other actors who play presidents on TV, or are there any portrayals that you particularly like?
Would you guys all get together, like the President's Club?
We haven't done that yet, although I did have this idea, and it was running up to the election. I thought, wouldn't it be interesting if we had all of the TV presidents have a debate? I thought it would have been hilarious, but it never happened. Oh, well. And no, I haven't actually sat and spoken with anyone about, playing the president, except for Morgan Freeman, of course, who is our executive producer and who plays the Chief Justice on our show. And he has directed the initial episode of season 2. He directed an episode in the first season, and then he directed the season premiere, season 2, and the season premiere, season 3, and again this season. And I got to chat with him, with Morgan, about, what's it like for you, man, walking around and people know you played the president? He said, yeah, it's interesting. Yeah. Because people come up to you now, the show's been on a while, and I was walking up a street in Williamsburg the other day. I was passing a restaurant and people sitting outside of the tables, and as I walked past, I heard a guy say, well, there goes the president. It's really funny. And then there are those people who actually will speak to me directly. As I was crossing a street last week in Williamsburg, and a guy was coming the other way, and as we passed, he said, "Mr. President." So it's a wonderful kind of thing. There's a great sense of affection for the show that one gets as an actor when you're out, walking around.
I was listening to an interview with you, and you had said that I think you're not sure what it is about you, but you're consistently cast in these kind of Americana roles. Like, you in some capacity happen to define Americana for people.
Apparently so.
What
I don't know why that is. I'm the son of a Shakespearean actor. I mean, my dad was a student of the Bard. That was his great love. He was a portrait sculptor. He was not a cowboy, although he did a lot of Westerns. But maybe, I don't know, maybe growing up in California, somehow I wound up with a lot of dust on me, and I'm not sure why that is. But hey, it's okay with me, and I'm happy to wear the mantle,
Are you in any way in your personal life a cowboy? Do you ride horses? Are you a rancher?
Oh, I'm a horseman, yeah. I'm a horseman, and I've had horses in my life. I don't have them now. I still have all my tack, I've got a bunch of saddles. In fact, the last Western I did was, we did a remake of Monty Walsh, Tom Selleck. I worked with Tom a few times, He's a real devotee of the genre, and he's incredibly knowledgeable about it. And he had saddles made that were period perfect, accurate saddles for the time. And at the end of production, he actually gave me my saddle from the film, so I still have that. So it's definitely a big part of my life, yeah.
I think we have time for one more question.
Hi.
Hi.
So I know the show is shot in New York City for the most part, and are you mostly in studio, and what is the studio?
Well,
like?
we have sound stages in Greenpoint in Brooklyn, and that's where the stage is where we have the set for the Oval Office and all of the interiors of the White House. And then next door to that, on another stage, is all of the interior set for the McCord home. And then across, about 10 minutes away, there's another stage where they have all of the interiors for the State Department. And then all of the exteriors. The show goes anywhere and everywhere, New York and environs, Long Island, upstate. It's amazing how they can make just about any place in this neck of the woods look like any place that it needs to be. I mean, they found places that they made look like the friggin' Middle Eastern desert, I mean, it's kind of amazing, And they have gone to Washington. They went to D.C. The end of the season last year and actually grabbed some authentic stuff from there. But most of what we shoot is in New York City or on the stages or out in Long Island or upstate or New Jersey, different places.
Mr. Carradine, I have to let you go. When can people see the season 4 premiere of Madam Secretary?
We'll be premiering October 8th, this coming Sunday, 10 p.m. on CBS.
And is Morgan Freeman directing this episode?
He did.
All right.
And he's in it.
And he's in it. And
Yeah.
Sir, when can people see your David Lowery film? Is that?
Oh, David Lowery, yes. It's called The Old Man and the Gun. It's Robert Redford and Casey Affleck and Danny Glover, Tom Waits, who's an old friend. And you know what? I'm about to go down. They want to do some pickup shots. I'm going to go down and do that later this month. I would imagine.
Sundance or something
Yes,
like that?
yeah, probably a spring release. I'm not sure what they have in mind, but.
Awesome. Everybody give it up right here for the president.
Thank you.
Steve Carradine. Mr. Carradine.